Yeah, I think Future Press has done some From Soft related books in the past, but yeah, these are huge. It says 500 pages. Is this right? Oh my
Holy
God.
crap, that's about as big as
512 per
the
volume.
Bloodborne one's like 600.
Well, I mean, Elden Ring is such a huge game. Like, it's not,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not surprised it's big, but that's over 1,000 pages combined. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Which, you always wonder, like, I don't know how that works, like with studios and publishers. Like, is there someone, like, is Katao at FromSoft rounding up all these materials and like sending them to some localizer at Bandai, and then like they're translating it, and then they're sending it to Future Press? Like, I have no idea how that, that dissemination of information works. But what's
yeah.
cool about the strategy guides is, like, you kind of do need to comb through, because you always wonder if you'll find something.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
are there going to be some cool nuggets in there kind of directly from FromSoft? You never know.
Right. I find it really funny. I was looking, so me and my brother have been playing the first Dark Souls game because it's basically his first run through of the games. I've been kind of easing him into it.
Yeah.
And we played Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, and then we went to Dark Souls 1, and we just got out of Blight Town. And I'm trying to describe it to him, and I'm just like reading the strategy guide, because in my head I'm just like, I skip Blight Town like almost every playthrough.
Oh, really?
I do the master key skip, like, just because I hate Blight Town. I do not like swamp levels, so I was like, I'm gonna skip Blight Town. And so I'm trying to run my brother through like how to leave it, and I'm just like, oh gosh, okay, I'm pulling out the strategy guide.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I never minded Blade Town. I thought the hate for it was always kind of a little overrated
it's
over
not
the years.
horrible. I think leaving Blight Town's the worst part, though. Because if you
Yeah.
don't know what you're doing and then you wind up in Ash Lake, you aren't
Right.
getting out, and then there
Yeah.
goes your run.
Yeah, like if you know Blade Town, it's not a big deal. Even if you do, it can be annoying, but especially if you're new to the game, yeah, it can be pretty confusing. I feel like these days when I fire up DS1, I've actually been going down to Blighttown first and ringing that bell.
Really?
And then, just to, like,
I would not be able to do that.
Like, last 2 or 3 years when I've played the game, I think just to mix it up, just so the experience feels different. Yeah, I'll go down and get that bell first, and then go up to the Emerald Parish. It gives the game, like, that first kind of act of the game, a totally different flavor when you do that.
I bet. Yeah. Like, I think so. Like, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2 and Elden Ring, just because I haven't gotten to it, are the only ones I haven't done Soul Level 1 runs of. So I've done, like Demon Souls, Bloodborne, and Dark Souls 3. But I'm just like, Dark Souls 1, it's everything requires so many stats. I just feel like all the stuff I enjoy doing, I would not be able to do. And then Dark Souls 2, I find most of its difficulty in the enemy placement.
Yeah, DS2 is probably the gankiest of all the games.
You know, you can't level up, so you can't get that adaptability, so that roll makes everything a nightmare.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting. DS2 is definitely heavy-handed with some of the enemy placements, and I've always felt that because when I finished Elden Ring, I've talked to a number of people who, like, when they finished Elden Ring, either like that first playthrough or, they did a couple cycles, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take a break. That was sort of my initial, like, discovery phase with the game. And it seems like most people have had that itch to throw on one of the previous games after.
Kind of like how I went back to Dark Souls 2 for the Platinum.
Yeah.
After 5.5 years.
yeah, exactly. And, like, I have a friend who wanted to pick up Sekiro after Elden Ring, and, like, I have this urge to do a couple cycles in Demon Souls. And when I did that, I've always felt this way. I always sort of had this opinion, but playing through it, especially even after Elden Ring, like, I really think the enemy placements in Demon Souls are just about perfect.
Oh yeah, I think it has the best enemy placement in the whole series, honestly, like, besides Elden Ring now. But, like, Dark Souls 1, like, even though it came after Demon Souls, I feel like they were still figuring things out. But at the same time, it's like they knew what they were doing. And I don't remember if it was one of your videos or someone else's videos, but I was watching a Dark Souls video regarding how like Dark Souls 1 is like perfect. And it was like, yeah, the second half, definitely rushed, but like the flow of it is just like the way that they intended, where it's like, oh, you got these bells, okay, now have fun. And the fact that there's no teleporting in the first one makes the run back to Firelink even more like devastating when you can't make it.
Right. So were you thinking like you agreed with that take or not so much?
Oh yeah, like as much as like I hate the fact that you can't teleport as like a personal gripe, but like it makes so much sense though in that aspect, because it's like all like Dark Souls 3, like a lot of the world is not actually interconnected, I don't think. I mean, I know some of it is, but if you remember, like from the start of the game you go into it and then you go from there to the high wall through the bonfire, and then you go to Vort, and then you gotta be teleported to the undead settlement. So it's not all interconnected. Whereas
right, yeah, they get
1 and
close,
2
but
were
it's not, it's not
completely
exact.
connected.
Right, yeah, and Bloodborne's kind of similar, where like stretches of Bloodborne are totally interconnected. Yeah. And then there's some chunks of the game that aren't, and that's never bothered me. I think, yeah, like Dark Souls 1 will always be awesome for that reason, that the whole map is interconnected, and you go down into the depths and then up and into Anor Londo. Like that'll always be special, I think. But I've always sort of preferred the Demon Souls experience. Like I think Demon Souls 1 is a little
like acts.
Yeah, and you do have that freedom of like, maybe you're in the Swamp of Sorrow and it's like, you know what, I'm a little stuck here, I'm gonna go over to the Stonefang Tunnel, or you can mix it up a little. It's a little Elden Ring-ish in that sense, or Elden Ring rather is a little Demon Souls-ish, but it's a lot tighter. It's obviously a shorter game, but there's no like excess fat, whereas that I do think, as much as I adore DS1 and I always will, that second half of the game can feel like a little bit of a slog.
Yeah, especially the Tomb of Giants. A whole area where you can't see like a thing in there.
Yeah, like there's
not even torches in the game. You have the option of getting the sunlight maggot through either saving Solaire or killing him, or you got the like 0.5 chance of a necromancer dropping it. Or no, don't you get the necromancer
the lantern
from like where Patches drops you off? I think I was remembering that wrong.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, but you still have to go through this pitch black area just to get there, and it's so ridiculous, and it makes me have to play through the game completely different, because I usually get that out of the way.
Yeah, and even like the Duke's Archives, like I think is really cool aesthetically, but can be kind of annoying.
You have to change the stairs, and
changing the stairs, climbing up the big ladder.
Then you gotta take like 15 minutes just to figure out where little sparkles are barely showing where you walk.
Yeah, you have to allow Seath to kill you, and it's a little slow, and obviously the whole like Izalith part of the game was just literally unfinished. And I think, Miyazaki's even commented on that, like the development, they just did not have as much time as they wanted to iron out some of those wrinkles. So yeah, I think it ends up feeling a little bloated in comparison to Demon Souls. It's obviously incredible, but yeah, I've always liked just how tight Demon Souls is.
Yeah, and like one thing I find really funny is with the Dark Souls 1 remaster, which I think they should have just done a remake, but that's just me. There was jokes, and I commented on it too, my first playthrough, that all the remaster was frame rate fix in Blight Town, and like one graphical fix in Lost Izalith, which was, if you remember in the vanilla version of Dark Souls 1, where you go where the fog door is for the Beta Chaos, where that door is, there was just black. It was just like a black placeholder square.
Yeah.
And then in the remaster, they put like just a background graphic, but I just kind of had to laugh because I'm like, wow, that's the most they did, I think. in this remaster. I mean, I was happy just to have a version of it that I can play with my friends. So I was like, okay, I'm fine with having it ported to PS4. But, you know, a little more effort could have been put into it.
Yeah, I think most people were pretty underwhelmed by that remaster, which FromSoft didn't even handle. The name of the studio's escaping me right now, but yeah, it was a pretty bare bones job. Like, to your point, it's great. The game has been better preserved, and you can play it on obviously PC, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation consoles now. But yeah, it's, other than the frame rate stability, there's not a lot to it. I bet it gets remade at some point. I don't know if it'll get like the Blue Point treatment, but I'm sure it's inevitable. Yeah,
they should stick with Blue Point remaking their games, because like Demon Souls remake, the amount of quality of life changes. Because I think the thing that annoyed me the most was wanting to go pick up an item and then not having enough room because I forgot to go to Stockpile Thomas.
Yep.
And then like there was one playthrough I really wanted the Knight's Armor, and I didn't realize that like that was the item I was going to pick up. And then I hit X on it. It was like, your inventory is full. So I went back and put my stuff in my inventory, and it was just gone. It just despawned. Yeah. And so there goes that armor set.
Yeah, they made a lot of little tweaks, little quality of life improvements, and it's just, I don't know. Like, I still think it's maybe the craziest video game I've ever looked at. Like, if it's not if it's not the craziest, it's right up there. You know, like Cyberpunk, Last of Us Part 2. Like, there's a few of those games where just visually they're beyond, I think, everything else we've seen.
Oh yeah.
Blue Point, they're wizards. They are so good at what they do. It's crazy.
The thing I find really funny, so as much as like both of us like Elden Ring, and I think the game is gorgeous, but not gonna lie, the Demon Souls remake just looks better than any other Dark Souls game in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, especially the environments. Like, there's no comparison.
The lighting's perfect, and even though they changed how the fluted helmet looked, they gave you the original fluted helmet as a like a bonus if you beat the phalanx in the tutorial. And when I found that out, I was just like, they actually put it in the game?
Yeah, and so many little touches too, like just ambient occlusion stuff, and there's all these like little visual embellishments. Even in the, like, I don't know, I'm assuming you're probably the same. I almost always opt for like the performance mode in a game with options. But Demon Souls is one of those games where I will switch to 30 FPS sometimes just to take it in, because it looks very similar, but there's almost like a like a depth or like a density, to the environments, to the three-dimensional space. It's just a little different when you shift to 30, because there's that pixel shift where you get true 4K versus 1440p. But then there's just a few other tricks, and I don't know how they do it, but like one area that's coming to mind is Phalanx's chamber right through the gate. Boletarian Palace, right at the Archstone. Like, just walking around in that room and switching between 60 and the 30 mode,
you could just see all the bricks.
Yes, exactly. Like
individual bricks,
little
even though
dust
it loops
particles in the air or something. It's so crazy.
Like, there is a point, I mean, obviously, unless they didn't, but I'm sure the bricks probably loop, but it's blended so well that you can't even tell.
Yeah, it feels like hand-tailored every square inch. It's so impressive, and it makes it just so cool to play that remake and to be in that world, and it adds this whole new level to Demon Souls, which was already an awesome game. And there's some people, they're always going to prefer the original PS3 game, that original art style, everything. 15 FPS fighting some bosses, like they want the purity of that experience, and I totally get it. But these days, like, if I want to play Demon Souls, it's that Blue Point remake all the way. And it's so good. And the haptics in the PS5 controller, you swing, like, swinging a sword into a wall just to feel it. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think Demon Souls got my love for like Magic Knight build, and it's not even just I did this before I even knew Magic was just ridiculously overpowered in Demon Souls, but like I mean I only recently got into Dungeons and Dragons, but I've always been a fantasy geek, but magic just always seemed really cool, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do magic. And I was like, this is crazy powered, but like it's so satisfying to just like from a distance be shooting this boss where in a spot where otherwise you can't reach it, like the Tower Knight. You just shoot at its head.
Oh yeah, magic is I actually really like magic in Demon Souls, and Elden Ring kind of inspired me to go back and just do that pure mage playthrough in Demon Souls. And Bluepoint did such a good job embellishing all the spells visually, and they're not quite as
glow.
Right, they're not quite as wild and like cinematic as Elden Ring spells, but they're really good. And like you said, the glow, just the colors, the sound effects, super cool.
Yeah, that one thing that just kind of makes it a little disappointing is that like Dark Souls 1 through 3, this magic's not that good, I've noticed personally. Like Dark Souls 1, you don't get like any of the good spells until post Anor Londo, I don't think. And then Dark Souls 2, it's just like it's a trip just to find any magic. And then 3, you know, you gotta get past the Crystal Sage if you want to do any mage stuff, and the Crystal Sage has that ridiculous magic resist.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. Like some of the cooler, more interesting spells you might actually want to use as a mage are, you know, mid or late game, definitely. But I've always thought that magic, you know, kind of a counterpoint to that is that magic can feel a bit like an easy mode in some of the older games. And to your point about just casting at a boss from a distance, it can simplify certain encounters, but at the same time, like that, I thought that's what was interesting about Elden Ring. Some instances I felt were much better suited to some kind of melee build, and then other instances much more suited to magic. I didn't feel like there was this one kind of easy way though to play through the entire game. Because it always felt like there were certain, you know, like mob encounters or bosses in Elden Ring where you were gonna be at a disadvantage with magic or at a slight disadvantage with melee. I feel like they maybe balanced that out a little better than like, I don't know, DS3, where I think magic's pretty OP. Like it does trivialize certain parts of the game.
I think the hardest thing when the run's not done yet, only for the sole fact I've not gotten to play with him for a while, but a run that I'm doing with one of my friends, that mage monkey that I made. That one's not done yet. We beat Huaralu, we beat Melania for him, but not for me yet, and then we have Radagon and Elden Beast. I think the funniest thing is when we had to fight Estelle, I basically had to do nothing because I couldn't do anything to him because my entire build was magic, and Estelle has just crazy magic resist. And I was using the Blade of Shadow and Flame, I think it's called.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And this was like, at first when I started using it, I didn't realize it was like overpowered, and I was like, okay, this is cool. And then they nerfed it. And then it was useless. And I got to Estelle, and I'm like, wow, now my weapon's doing no damage. What the heck?
I'm trying to think. Is it a slightly different name? Because I know the sword you're talking about. Is it
Sword of something in flame?
Of Night and Flame. Maybe that was what you said. Okay.
Yes. I said Shadow and Flame.
Okay. Yeah, close enough.
Sounded cool.
Yeah.
But
he's a really cool boss. Whatever it is.
My favorite boss in the game.
Yeah, and I also think a pretty underrated boss because I don't feel like since the game's come out, you've heard nearly as much about that boss as you've heard about
I've only
some
seen
of the other obvious ones.
Maybe 1 or 2 lore videos regarding Estelle. And I remember when I fought him, right away, my brain went, Bloodborne and Sekiro Divine Dragon. Like, those were the 2 things in my head, because it literally looked like if you took an amygdala and gave it a human face with the celestial like theme of the dragon, and just I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, it was so cool. It was such a surprise when you went into that chamber and it's like, okay, I'm fighting something weird and cosmic.
Yeah, and then there's also the one that you could get the consecrated snowfield in that one dungeon. That so when I saw it a second time, it was even harder. I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah, super cool boss, and a boss that you just don't hear as much about. You hear a lot about Radon, you hear a lot about Melania, again for obvious reasons, but yeah.
Poster boys.
Really cool. Yeah.
I find that funny because like Melania gets the I feel like the treatment that Dark Souls 3 and Dark Souls 2 did, where like Dark Souls 1 on the cover you had the knight that you play as, but now that like it's been kind of more revealed, if you look closer at the original Dark Souls 1's cover, it's actually Artorias, where like his sword and shield are, but they make it look like it's the player character. And then the remaster, it's, you know, the player character over the bonfire. Dark Souls 2, you've just got the hunter. Demon Souls, you've got the knight set. Then you got Dark Souls 2, which the vanilla one has the From Knight set, but then you look at the Scholar of the First Sin, it's Forlorn. And then Dark Souls 3, they've got the Lord of Cinder. And I'm like, okay, I mean, these are cool, but why show the final boss and the most annoying invader ever?
Yeah, Melania is kind of weird. Like I've kind of had like I'm sure most people have. I've had like a weird sort of emotional journey with her, where, there's the wow factor at first, where you don't know,
laugh at it.
Yeah, you're overwhelmed. I mean, that's the whole point. You don't know exactly what you're dealing with. It's of course super challenging. And then like if you get through the boss, however you get through the boss, you know, then you have different feelings. And then once the game, you know, has marinated for you for a while, and maybe you've done multiple cycles, you've revisited the boss, you've avoided the boss, whatever, you've had more time to think about it. And I was going back and forth with my friend Cool on Twitter, I don't know, this was probably like a month or two ago, and I feel like I sort of had an epiphany about her, where I appreciate kind of what I guess she represents. Like, it's very clear that FromSoft wanted to just break the game with her. They actually wanted to create the most uncompromising, ridiculous boss. Yeah, right, exactly.
One that heals itself every time it hits you.
Yep, and like the dive bomb attacks in phase 2 are, there's just enough jankiness there, you know, where it's like, it's just enough to be annoying. It's just enough to be just slightly inconsistent. But yeah, they wanted to break the game. They did.
I find really
it's not like it was an accident, though. You know, it wasn't like some people talk about it that way. It's like, no. Like this is what they set out to do, and they did it. But Cole and I were like going back and forth about Melania and then a boss like Sword Saint. Where Sword Saint is also super challenging, right? Like when you first get to Sword Saint, you realize you're essentially dealing with 4 HP bars. That's also overwhelming. It's like a puzzle.
That was so awesome.
And it's like, how do you get through this? How do you deal with this? But the more I've thought about it, there's like this balance in this sort of like cinematic perfection and this fairness with Sword Saint that I just don't think is there with Melania. Like, I understand what she is, what they were trying to do.
But then you look at Waterfowl Dancing. I mean, it does what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to kill you, but I don't think it's supposed to just one-shot you, because dodging that attack is just almost impossible unless you have this very second it hits down. And so like that was what made her break 90% of my runs. I had to try to kill her before she even thought about using that. All the other attacks I was perfectly fine with. I'm not even kidding when I say I almost beat her. This being will end in 10 minutes. No. What are you talking about? That's lame. Might have to set up a second meeting. But so one thing I found ridiculous is that I actually almost beat her on my very first run. and then it was her second phase, and I didn't realize I had Scarlet Rot on me, and then she used Waterfowl Dance. And then it took me maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 to get back to even the second phase.
Right.
And the thing I find even crazier is that, I mean, yeah, I found her extremely hard, but in my opinion, she's definitely not the hardest boss in the Soul series, as everyone claims. Only for the sole fact I found Orphan of Cause harder, in my personal opinion.
Interesting.
That's also because of just like how I screw around in the game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's how these games go. Like everybody, it's always interesting to hear, you know, which bosses or levels people struggle more or less with. Sometimes things that give you problem don't give somebody else a problem, or vice versa. So yeah, that's always interesting. Yeah, I can't say I relate though. I would say Melania is like, to me, she's in like a different galaxy versus Koss. I don't think Koss is too bad, but like she is. My hope for Elden Ring though is that they don't lean more into that kind of boss design.
Oh yeah,
for DLC. Like I really hope, and that was the point about Sword Saint, where I don't think Sword Saint is as difficult as Melania for several different reasons. But I think it's a way more fulfilling and enjoyable fight. And that's not the only boss I would say that about. So I hope, you know, we get more of those just fulfilling, cool fights versus them trying to just break the game.
Yeah, like Sword Saint, like I think I spent more time on Sword Saint than Melania, and I think maybe I'm also thinking time spent on boss.
Yeah.
Because Sword Saint took me almost a week to beat, like the first time. I could not figure out how to dodge those like wind hits. For some reason, I couldn't realize that I could just block those, but or you know, clash them. But he took me roughly a week, and then the first time I fought Orphan of Cause, almost the same thing, and then Lawrence the first Viker. I find him harder than Orphan.
Yeah, Lawrence is no joke. Another boss that gets a shout out sometimes, but I still don't feel like you hear as much about Lawrence.
Yeah, because everyone's like he's a knockoff cleric beast, which yeah, but then you get to the second phase, and unless you figure out the cheese and then you decide to do the cheese, you're trying to figure out how to avoid his swiping attacks and avoid walking in lava.
Right.
And it's crazy, and I don't get it. I don't get how they're, you know, just kind of like, okay, well, he's just gonna circle around. So I mean, if you just stay in his inner right armpit, he'll never hit you.
Yeah.
And I didn't find this out until we were trying to fight him with me and my brother were trying to fight him, and I was like, okay, I'm tired of this. I'm doing the cheese. He's just like, what do you mean? And I just get into the armpit. I'm like, stay back.
Yeah, see, that's a funny one too. Like, I think the definition of cheese when it comes to Soulsborne games is kind of funny, because to me, that's an exploit. That's like something that just any player can do and get an upper hand on the boss. And you could say like, oh, like it's a less pure way to fight, right? Or it's kind of a cheap tactic. But to me, cheese is when you basically break the AI. Like you break the game.
Like with Melania.
Have you seen
Jigsaw and just
or have you seen Sean when people get Radon up on the hills outside?
Oh, and he just rockets the lake.
Yeah, and he's just right. He can rocket into the lake. He can even rocketing into the lake is, I don't want to say like it's more legit, but it does feel like an exploit. Whereas when you get him to like be clipping up on the hill outside of the main arena and he just falls and dies, like that's cheap. That's true cheese. Whereas the Lawrence thing, to me, it's like, it's kind of a cheap exploit, but you know, you can just technically do it if you want to.
Gosh, that reminds me of my favorite glitch I've ever accidentally have happen, which was I always do like a really stupid run in Bloodborne when I feel like it. And I was like, I'm just going to use the dumbest weapon. And I forget what I was using, but I basically just was like using throwing items. And I did the pungent blood cocktail on the Bloodstar Beast, and I threw it at a wall, and he just clipped through the wall and died.
Mm,
and I didn't
wow.
even like touch him. And I think I was using the threaded cane because I absolutely hate that weapon. But I just, I'm just, I, I was just like, did that really just happen?
Yeah, I
And
can't say I've
then,
ever had that, because that's like a pretty tried and true speedrunning strat too, is in that
yeah,
one. I guess if you're facing out, like you're facing the entrance of that arena, it's like that back left corner. You just chuck,
yeah.
yeah, you chuck a punji into that corner and just wail. And yeah, but I've never had that. So the boss just clipped through the wall and was gone and dead.
Yeah, he just like,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it took a few seconds because he like clipped through the wall, and I'm like, where'd he go? And then I just hear,
Interesting.
and I mean, the same thing kind of was happening when me and my brother were fighting Ludwig. We would summon Valtier, and for some reason, Valtier just kept falling through the floor. He would be fighting Ludwig. Ludwig would corner him, and then next thing I know, I never saw any death thing, but he ain't there.
Funny.
So I'm just assuming he clipped through the wall and just kind of is just chilling out underneath the map.
You know, and like you mentioned Orphan of Kos, like thinking more about that, the boss stuff, like that, it is an interesting comment of like, well, to me, like Orphan of Kos was tougher than Melania. And I bet like for your experience, that probably was true, because I'm guessing like you played Bloodborne before Sekiro, and then obviously you played Sekiro before Elden Ring. So
Yeah.
at that time, when you fought Orphan of Kos for the first time, you didn't have that benefit of like having the Sekiro experience and having the Elden Ring experience and having, you know, a bunch more cycles in DS1 and DS2 and DS3 and Demon Souls. So that probably was, I mean, DS3 would probably have not been out or something. I don't know exactly what your timeline was for playing them, but because I feel like I've had that too. Like sometimes when you're less experienced with the games and you meet a big challenge like that for the first time, overcoming that is a much bigger deal than overcoming maybe like an objectively harder boss in a later game, because you have maybe years more experience now in these games, and that does help in those moments. That helps even in a fight like Melania.
Yeah, sad thing is I didn't get into Dark Souls like right away just because I didn't even know about it for a while. And Bloodborne was actually my very first Souls game.
Oh, nice.
And I got it like maybe a month after it came out or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I got to the area in Yarnum where it's the little bonfire thing going on, where they're just kind of hanging out over the dead scourge beast that's just kind of hanging.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 50 dudes. And
Yep.
I fought that, and I'm like, I'm gonna hate this game because I couldn't get past it for like a month.
Yep.
And I eventually did, and I remember my very first playthrough of Bloodborne, I beat the wet nurse, went to Gearman, and was just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I didn't even fight Gearman. I just told him, yeah, just take me out, and then I didn't play it for like a year after.
It's like, yeah, just cut off my head, put me out of my misery here. Yeah.
And then I played Dark Souls 3, and then I went back to Bloodborne with a new mindset.
Yeah.
And now I play every game like it's Bloodborne. I'm extremely aggressive.
Sure.
And it's kind of ridiculous. It was funny because I had gotten Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. I think it was for like one of my birthdays or something. And then I was like, okay, Bloodborne looks really cool. And then I was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna hate every second of it. And then I started playing Dark Souls 3 and eventually got through all that and went back to Bloodborne. And it was just like, this is the best game ever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it goes. I mean, when I first played Dark Souls 1, I was like everybody. I was terrible. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was super afraid of, you know, all the enemies and the mobs and the initial bosses, which now seem trivial and silly. But at the time, I had never played a game like that, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how it goes.
I mean, it was fairly easy enough for me to understand, like, the appeal because I grew up with, like, Zelda, you know, and it's so weird to compare Dark Souls to Zelda, but in reality, if you want to be realistic, it's just a really hard Zelda game.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, then I started kind of thinking about it like that. It's like, okay, well, I've been, you know, all these Zelda games, maybe it shouldn't be too hard for this. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly quite a bit more challenging than probably any Zelda game. Yeah, they upped the difficulty a little bit in Breath of the Wild, but I mean that formula, like it's clearly a source of inspiration for Miyazaki, like the
Yeah.
original Legend of Zelda formula. You can
Yeah.
feel that in the Soulsborne games.
Yeah, the sad thing is, surprisingly, I didn't like Breath of the Wild that much just because I got bored really quick. And I was really worried
Oh yeah.
that would happen with Elden Ring, but then I just kind of, I'm strolling around going to this castle, and all of a sudden there's this old man with a cane wrecking me. Telling me
Yeah.
that he needs to put out my flame.
Yeah, extinguish your flame of ambition. Yeah, Breath of the Wild is a really polarizing game, I found. Like people really, really love it, or it just
Or they
didn't
just
click at
really
all.
hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the dungeons were the failing point of it, just because it was the same dungeon over and over again, basically. It was like, it didn't look any different, and I was just like, okay, this sucks. Unlike Elden Ring, I think did perfectly. You had the mixture between mines, which were perfect for looking at, or not looking at, for trying to get smithing stones. You had caves and whatever, which had cool side bosses, and then you had catacombs, which were just like a puzzle dungeon for the most part.
Right. Yeah, and I actually enjoyed the puzzles of Breath of the Wild shrines, but for me, I think, and I mean, I really do like Breath of the Wild, but I can see where or why a lot of people don't, because I think like the shrines would have been fine had there been like meteor dungeons elsewhere, and even for me, like the Divine Beast just didn't quite cut it.
There was more diversity,
Yeah, they were pretty simplistic, basically some variation of the same boss in each one. They weren't real long, all kind of aesthetically similar. And there was one, I think it's the desert one, was my favorite by far, if memory serves, because it's been a little while since I played through it. But like the other ones were a little
getting to it.
Yeah, right, like getting to it. Yeah, the music was awesome. It was kind of cinematic. And then I actually thought the like traversal and the puzzles within were a little better than the others. But yeah, I get it, especially, longtime Zelda fans. Like they took a risk, they switched up the formula. And I think, people probably would have been okay with the shrines had there been meteor, kind of more traditional dungeons elsewhere, and we just kind of didn't have those.
I think my biggest bias is because I grew up with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
Sure.
So my brain goes to there when I think Zelda. And I think Breath of the Wild, funny enough, is the only Zelda game I'm not fully beaten.
Interesting.
Because I get to Hyrule Castle and I'm just like, okay, I'm tired of all these Lionels everywhere.
Yeah, it's... I mean, I feel like you can definitely see where they just kind of ran out of ideas, and there's some reskinning, and
and the Lionels were just frustrating to fight, in my opinion. I mean, they were definitely a challenge, but I don't know, I just didn't think it was a fair challenge.
Yeah, I didn't mind him too much, but yeah, I don't know. It's very much like a personality thing. Like people resonate with the game or they don't. I really liked being in the world. I liked the sense of freedom and exploration, and I did like the art direction. I really liked the piano soundtrack. Just a lot of the ingredients did
really
click.
Cool when you would hear that little piano with the Guardians singing you.
I'm never like thrown off though when someone's like, yeah, I just didn't like Breath of the Wild. I get it. Like it's clear why. I think especially too, like newcomers to Zelda, it seems like have received it a little better, and it is the longtime fans, which that's me too. I mean, I grew up playing Ocarina and Wind Waker and Majora's Mask and all those, but I think it's the people who played Ocarina and played Twilight Princess and they're expecting that, and it's just so radically different that they probably lost some people with it.
But like I think kind of like what I was saying with Elden Ring, I think they just like watched where it failed and made it way better. Like the dungeons reuse like the same assets kinda one way or another, but in reality they're all different. And I think the one thing I was confused about is I seem to remember seeing something where originally they were thinking of having randomly generated dungeons at one point, for Elden Ring. And I seem to remember, I could be remembering completely wrong, right? But I seem just to remember reading about them being like, oh, cool, it makes me think of Diablo 2, where no run is the same. And I was like, that'd be sick. But
yeah, I mean, that could have been. I don't remember that like detailed pre-release, but I mean, it could have been. For me, I didn't mind.
Rumor or something.
Oh yeah, there were no
rumor the gold excrement.
Yes, yeah. there's no shortage of rumors. That's for sure. But yeah, like in Elden Ring, I think from soft games, in my opinion, they just feel so good to play that it's like, yeah, like there's clearly a few templates for these minor dungeons, the catacombs and the caves, and there's some reskinned bosses in a lot of them, and some of the enemy, mobs and encounters are familiar. Yeah. But the game just feels so good that I don't mind. Like, I just want more to do, more to play, an excuse, another area to delve into. So I don't mind that. Right. But I'm really big on feel, and I just love From Software's games, so that worked for me. Whereas like Breath of the Wild, it was a big step. I think even if you don't like the game, you can definitely see how it was an evolution of the combat. But it was also an evolution of the combat too, right? It was little more advanced than what we were doing, even though like
was very
but even though like Ocarina, you can't like count that out. Like the Z targeting was so influential, and that was a really big deal, 20 plus years ago. But yeah, it was like a good evolution in terms of combat, but it does not compare at all to what From Soft offers.
Oh yeah, I think I don't know, I think the rolling, I think it's kind of a joke at this point, just for the sole fact that if there's a game with rolling in it, they're like, oh, it's a Souls-like, but in reality,
it is. Yeah, it's totally. It is. Yeah, you didn't know that, Sean? It's a Souls-like. Yeah, every game. The new Pokemon game, Arceus, whatever.
It is a Souls-like.
It's a Souls-like. You can roll in it. Yeah, that makes it a Souls-like.
I was telling one of my friends that I was playing that, and I'm like, oh my god, they made a Pokemon Dark Souls game, and he goes, shut up.
Yeah, that's all it takes. Yeah.
And I had to chuckle, but in reality, it's like the camera angle, difficulty, and then of course, dodge rolling. My favorite Souls-like, and it's the most different Souls-like, is Mortal Shell.
Yeah.
And I think you said you've played that one, right?
Oh yeah, extensively. Yeah.
Okay, I for some reason couldn't remember.
No, I love Mortal Shell.
So I've played almost every one that's had a physical release at this point. Hellpoint I can't click with anymore. There's Remnant from the Ashes. That one was pretty good. People call it a Souls-like, but I think it's more of a kind of like a Destiny-like in a way. I don't think it's exactly a Souls-like. There's a dodge roll. But
well, there's a lot of ingredients that go into it. I think we've talked about that before too. I think we're seeing a lot of games now, obviously, because From Soft is what they are. You're seeing a lot of From Software inspired or influenced games, and that's fine, and that's to be expected. But for something to actually be a Souls-like Mortal Shell, like Neo, there's really specific ingredients with the design, the combat, the way in which you upgrade or customize your player character, and there's just a lot of specific ingredients that go into it, where you can even look at a game like Blasphemous, which I really like, but it's not a Souls-like. It is a From Soft inspired Metroidvania.
Yeah,
and people will call it a Souls.
Cinder Lilies. Here's a few others I can't remember off the top of my head. I might say Hollow Knight, but I'm not entirely sure about that one.
Well, Hollow Knight's the same, right? Where it's I think there's some clear,
but not Souls-like.
Exactly, there's clear From Soft influence, which of course there's, because we're getting to the point where being inspired by From Soft is almost like an accident. You might not even know as a game designer you're influenced by From Soft. It's like being influenced by Mario or something 20-30 years ago. It's of course you're going to be or the original Legend of Zelda formula. You can't help but be influenced by these things.
And it's funny because it's I know I had talked to you about how I enjoy finding different Souls-like games, and I look for games that are like Neo, like Mortal Shell, Lords of the Fallen and the Surge were like okay. They weren't super great. I think they were really clunky, but I mean they worked. They did the job that they wanted to do. I just think they could have been better. Then the Surge 2, they figured out how to do it a little better. But like games like that, you know, you got, you know, Neo, Mortal Shell. But like people,
those are the only two for me. Like I can't admit that I love.
Those are probably the
other
best
Souls
out of
yeah,
all.
Mortal Shell, and then we've griped a bit back and forth about Neo 1, where like it's obviously
it's
like,
so ridiculous that difficulty gap.
Well, it's like, is it a good game? Yes, of course.
Yeah, 100%.
But the fact that Neo 2 exists, it is hard for me to go back to Neo 1 because Neo 2, I feel, improves upon just about every shortcut.
Right, like it doesn't make it to where your level requirement for the next level is like 50 levels higher than the last level.
Yeah, and I feel like
which
there's
I think was kind of, I mean, I get it because I think they wanted you to grind more, and looking at Team Ninja's history of games, I kind of see where they were coming from because some of their games, they have that like grind factor. I mean, I get it. They kind of did what like Kingdom Hearts even does, where let's say this world wants you to be level 42 and the next world wants you to be like 47. Well, that's not going to happen if you just blaze through the story.
Right.
So they're like, okay, we want you to explore every circle of this place.
Well, and I think in Neo 1, there's just a bit of jank.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, just some other stuff that's not as good as it could be. And Neo 2 is so dialed in.
Gosh, yeah, I remember my first playthrough of Neo 2. That was the only game I played for like 2 months. I just was fine with it.
It's amazing.
And that same friend that I'm doing the mage build with, we were playing that. He ended up stopping because he was like, I'm getting tired of playing the same game for like 2 months. So I'm like, I'm not. 120 hours in, I'm just getting to the end of it. I'm like, when's the DLC coming out? DLC's come out and I've still not touched it.
Yeah, Neo 2 is so, I mean, both of those games, there's a lot of DLC, there's a lot of content. Like you said, especially Neo 1, it can get a bit grindy. Some people really want that, though. They want to grind.
Oh, yeah. They kind of tethered to that, you know, I mean, it works if you do it.
I think Neo 2 is so cool because it feels to me like the only example of a game that is in that Bloodborne Sekiro realm with the combat.
Oh, yeah.
It's the only one I've seen or experienced. Like my go-to, I think we've chatted about this before, but my go-to in Neo 2 is the Switchglaive. And switching the stances, and
I love the Switchglaive. That's the
the key pulsing. I mean, think about it reminds you of the Burial Blade quite a bit from Bloodborne. And when you think about like all the nuance to it, like between the key pulses, your 3 different stances, it's such a deep system. You can actually play Neo 2 on like a pretty surface level, but if you go deep with that game, it's the only game I've experienced that has that kind of Sekiro Bloodborne level depth with the combat.
Could you imagine if Sekiro
special.
had the stance thing? That'd make it even cooler.
Yeah. Well, see, my fantasy is that they do like a spin-off of Elden Ring in the land of reeds, which is referred to, right? So they do like an Eastern Elden Ring set within the universe, but very separate, with some kind of amalgamation of like Sekiro Bloodborne mechanics. Because I think I love ingredients from all the games, and I don't even know that Bloodborne's my personal favorite. I love all of it. It's like, you get it. It's like picking children, right? It's impossible.
That's me with bosses. When I was watching your top 10 series bosses, I'm like, how'd you even do this?
Oh, well, man, and some of them have changed since I made that months ago, right?
Especially with Elden Ring now.
Exactly. It's like, hey, here and now, this is what I'm feeling, but in 2 months, in 2 weeks, in 2 days, I might feel differently. It's just how it goes.
Estelle is definitely my favorite Elden Ring boss, but I don't know if that's my favorite series boss. Like,
right.
I think one of my favorite series bosses is Orphan of Cause.
Sure.
Just not Micolash. I swear to God, if anyone says Micolash is their favorite.
Yeah, I don't know about favorite. He definitely has his place, though.
He has a place.
Bloodborne would not be the same without him.
He makes every playthrough a nightmare.
Yeah, literally. But yeah, I mean, Bloodborne, the one thing that I do feel really strongly about with Bloodborne is that I think it has the best weapons. And it's not just which is interesting.
It doesn't even have much.
Right. It's like 20-ish weapons, or I think it's 20, like with all the DLC weapons.
Oh,
it's not.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say base game, it's only in the teens.
Right, but then you have which I think was a turnoff to some people, right? People who would play Demon Souls, and then the first two Dark Souls games. Yeah, they got to Bloodborne. They're like, wait a minute, there's like 15 weapons. What's going on here?
Only thing I'm sad about is there's no fist weapon. The Fist of Gracia is a parry weapon.
You might be in the minority there, Sean, with the wanting of that fist weapon.
I've done a fist build in every game that there's a fist weapon.
A glutton for punishment. Yeah, I can't say that I want to do a Bloodborne fist playthrough, but what I love though is that it's like a quality over quantity thing where there are fewer weapons, but the weapons are really deep. And the biggest thing to me is not just that the weapons transform, but they have the transforming attack. Like while you're switching, you can sneak in a little more damage, and that it sounds simple, but it adds so much depth to combat. So I would just love to see them. Like we don't necessarily need. I don't think we need Bloodborne 2, and I think based on what Miyazaki said,
Bloodborne Kart?
Yeah, Bloodborne Kart, that actually is going to exist. It seems like, but
I hope.
I don't think Miyazaki has any interest in doing sequels.
Get the Crash Team Racing. I mean, Crash Bandicoot's a Souls type.
There you go. Yeah.
Crash Team Racing, Bloodborne Kart, Dark Souls 2 kart.
There you go. Dark Souls 2 too. But yeah, I don't think he's ever going to do a Bloodborne 2, or if it happens, he won't direct it.
Honestly.
But that's the thing I want to see again, though. I just want to see the transforming weapons come back in another game.
I was hoping that would happen in Elden Ring, because I know you covered it before, where with the Ash of War system, and that I think was perfect, a great idea to do, where it's like you got this unique skill, or if it's a weapon with a normal skill, you don't like it, I could give it roar or whatever.
Yeah.
And it works. So I mean, I just hate that I have this bad tendency of accidentally breaking the game, where I found the scythe, and I'm sure you remember my reaction to, holy crap, this is too overpowered. I just got through Godfrey in like 5 seconds.
Oh yeah.
I was like, is he really a main boss? He's the poster boy, and I just blasted through him.
Yeah, he's felt a little trivial on some of my subsequent runs as well. I still love him. Like, I love the personality and the design and the music, but yeah, you can cut him down fairly quickly.
I just think it was funny. In some of the top 10 hardest boss things, I found people finding the visage of Godfrey, the gold one, really hard on there. And then I think back to when I was messaging you, I'm like, I just murdered Godfrey. And then more got, less than a minute with him as well. I didn't even see his second phase on my first playthrough. I didn't know he threw up on the floor and made geysers. I didn't know about that until my second or third playthrough.
Right. And was the scythe the grave scythe that you were using? Yeah, that one's I think that's the best non-Bloodborne scythe. That one is really cool.
Yeah, and I was just trying to make a really cool Bloodborne build, because I found the crow feather garb, and I'm like, this is Bloodborne. I'm going Bloodborne.
Oh yeah, and the talismans, depending on how you set those up, you can totally do a Bloodborne style playthrough. And you can also, I did that with one of my playthroughs too, where I did a Sekiro inspired playthrough where I was using the samurai with the katana, and the only shield that I used was the buckler, for parrying. Yeah. So it was a really pure Bloodborne, Sekiro style playthrough. So it's really cool that they made that option though in Elden Ring, that it's not this half-baked thing. You can really do it. I mean, sure, nothing's Bloodborne, nothing else is Sekiro, but you can get as close as possible, when compared to any other Souls game. So I thought that was a lot of fun. But yeah, we definitely need to see transforming weapons again. And that's why, I mean, even Cold Symmetry, I mean, do you like that? How in the Mortal Shell DLC, they're like, you know what? transforming weapons are so cool. We're just gonna break our own game and throw one in.
Oh yeah. I think it was like a spear that could turn into like a sword or something like that. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while.
Yeah, it can turn into it's sort of like a long axe that can turn into like double blades.
That's what it was. Yeah, like a lightsaber, like the Darth Maul lightsaber weapon.
The Axatana. Yeah, I had to look it up. I forgot the name. The Axatana. Yeah, it just totally. Yeah, they had to do it. They had to do it. It felt like a very Bloodborne kind of nod.
But like that's perfect.
Yeah.
Because like, just yeah, I agree. Like it's probably like the whole transforming weapons thing was probably one of the coolest ideas that came out of FromSoft. I mean, they obviously come up with really good ideas, and like
that's a big one though. That's a really.
I'm in a weird minority where I don't consider Sekiro a Souls-like because I think it's its own different thing.
I'm kind of with you there, right? It does not have some of the conventions.
And like I mentioned that in a group that I'm in for Dark Souls, and everyone was like, "No, you're wrong." But like, if you think about it, do any other Dark Souls primary combat you clanging swords for that stamina bar to break? That was complete. That was something completely new. You got the death blows. That was something cool. Stealth. I think Ghost of Tsushima had a lot of inspiration from Sekiro's stealth.
Yeah, and I think. I mean the fact that you can't.
Stealth.
Yeah, Tsushima is a cool game. I think. Yeah, Sekiro doesn't have the customization of the player character, and I do think customization is a huge part of a Souls-like. Oh, yeah. You have to be able to customize your player character.
Gotta make your guy look like a duck.
Yeah. I mean, from like, you know, the weapons to the armor to other accessories, that's a huge part of it, and that like Nioh leans really heavily into that. Mm-hmm. That's a huge part, and then Sekiro's combat is
can't customize your character much, but Nioh 2 you actually get the full character customization. It looks beautiful.
That character creator in Nioh 2 is really good too.
I think it's really honestly nice. I think it's better than Dark Souls.
Yeah,
with how just the face looks.
But no, I'm kind of with you there. Like Sekiro just has a lot of departures. It's almost like a bit of a rhythm game too. Mm-hmm. I think it probably has the best combat of any game I've ever played. But it's a huge departure in a lot of ways, and I think that's probably why like they wanted to make Elden Ring feel really flexible and really approachable to all kinds of players, new players, more experienced or veteran players, because Sekiro was so uncompromising. Like there really is a correct way to play Sekiro, and if you don't play it the correct way, you will die, or you will suffer. You will not have much fun. So I think it was almost like Sekiro was the inhale, Elden Ring was a bit of an exhale, but yeah, I'd love to see them go back to that at some point.
And I think that's one reason why the Demon of Hatred was as hard as he was, because you're supposed to fight him more like he's a Bloodborne boss. Because he basically, if you think about it, is totally a scrap Bloodborne boss, I feel.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a beast.
Play him like a Bloodborne boss, it works perfect. But if you try playing it like it's Sekiro, it just doesn't work. Unless you like know how to I am, you know, God knows how many hours into Sekiro. And I still don't know how that umbrella works.
You do or you don't know?
I don't. I have no idea how to make the attack work. He attacks it and I have no idea what to do after that. So I think I showed you the recording I did with the run I did where I didn't even die once or whatever. And, you know, I just played it like it was Bloodborne. I was just dodging perfect timing.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he's an interesting one. He has like the beast arm. Yeah, feels totally like a Bloodborne boss, but in that Sekiro context. You can fight him a lot of different ways, which I think is cool.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can fight him purely. You can just fight him with your sword. You can block everything. I mean, that's a really pure way to fight him. You can get really creative with the prosthetics. Like, I actually love the umbrella. The umbrella, the Suzaku's Lotus umbrella is probably my favorite tool in the game.
Yeah.
But there's so many ways, like, you can get really creative fighting that boss. And then there's just an intimidation factor with him because of his size. He's so much bigger than the player.
Oh, yeah.
You fight a lot of other, two-legged human characters.
Human, yeah.
Yeah, so you see Demon of Hatred, it's like a reality show.
Even the Headless and the Shimishin warriors, I mean, they're still human size. They're just,
right,
ghostly ghouls.
Yep.
But like, yeah, I remember first time going for the Demon of Hatred, and he just slapped me and I died. I'm like, oh, so it's gonna be this kind of game, ain't it?
Oh yeah, he kills you super quickly.
I think it's like 2 hits almost with full health.
Well, and I mean, pretty much all the games have that, at least one boss off to the side optional, and it's there for the players who want the challenge, and that's definitely Demon of Hatred and Sekiro.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think Sekiro also has one of my favorite bosses, only for the sole factor of how I had to pause the game because I was laughing so hard when I found him. It was Gyobu.
Oh yeah. Now, were you playing in English or Japanese?
In English.
That's
my
why.
First run. Because I'm just.
He sounds ridiculous in
English.
English.
My name is Gyobu Masataka Oniwa, and I had to pause. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be this kind of game, huh?
Yep.
And then he gets mad at you if you attack him during his speech, and that's funny too.
Yeah, for sure. And you can definitely see like Gyobu's influence in Elden Ring.
Oh yeah,
like the tree sentinels and
oh my god,
a lot of the mounted enemies.
Yeah, when you start fighting this guy on a horse, I think, unless I'm remembering this wrong, that's the first time From Software has gotten horseback combat right.
Yeah, well, they never
I don't think
seriously
done it before.
did it. Yeah, other than Gyobu, and then Elden Ring.
You go into Elden Ring. You've got the tree sentinels, the riding kiter raiders, I think, and then the Knights Cavalry.
Yep.
And those fights are probably some of the hardest fights of just the overworld, and it's great.
I think the tree sentinels are amazing. They're like one of my favorite enemies in the whole game. they were done so well.
Like, the funny thing is the Bloodhound step is a drop from, in my opinion, one of the hardest to fight Knights Cavalries, because for some reason he just gives me so much trouble.
Yeah, and that like northeast corner of Caelid on that bridge.
Yeah, I don't know why that area is so hard.
He's tough.
War for my fist build, especially for Melania.
Yeah, Bloodhound Step's cool. I actually used Bloodhound Step against, why is his name escaping me? The Plasudasax, the Dragon Lord.
Oh,
the lasers.
So cool.
Yeah, it's like my favorite. It's probably my favorite in the game. Like the laser attacks
were the best dragon fights in that game.
Yeah, like that's
like the other dragons. I'm like, that's not even a dragon. That's a wyvern.
yeah, a lot of them are wyverns.
Like, that's the weird thing. They're wyverns. They're not even dragons because they've only got the 2 feet. But then you've got Placidusax and Fortisax. They're traditional dragons.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome.
And those were the best. And I think it's funny that you have like the same love for like Estelle, because I mean, he's not a dragon, but he's just this like another way you could like Frankenstein this boss is if you take like Orphan of Cause's face with the moonlight butterfly.
Yeah.
And then amygdala.
Right, with like sort of because you do kind of approach that boss like you would a dragon a little bit.
Yeah, it's a huge arena, huge boss.
Yeah, like you can almost feel like a little bit of Madir and a little bit of some other ingredients in that fight.
I think Madir's the only boss in Dark Souls 3 I always skip. He just has too much health for my patience.
Yeah, I've always been a little low on Madir, which isn't a popular opinion. But I actually think Sin is cooler, like before Elden Ring, because Sin feels like a real dragon fight. Like Sin's flying around and there's this drama to it, and Midir is like
doesn't even have that annoying of a walk up too. Like you fight the Scaled Queen, I think her name's Alina.
Yeah.
And then you fight her, and then, you know, she summons Velstadt or whatever. And then, you know, that's a really cool fight. And then you unlock Sin's fight, and that's the real fight. And I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, he's awesome. And yeah, like Midir's a cool design, but I just think the experience of fighting Sin was a bit cooler. But then, yeah, you get into Elden Ring, and I mean, they definitely did dragons right. I mean, I think it's like the coolest dragon combat in at least any video game I've ever played or that I know of.
Yeah. Like I've not
go back and fight dragons in Skyrim after playing Elden Ring for a minute and like get a good laugh.
I've never been in Skyrim, funny enough. I always get to like the same spot and then I get tired of it for some reason. I think I'm just old of Bethesda games, I think. I played Fallout a lot growing up, and then now I go to Skyrim, I'm just like, I'm bored.
Oh, you're not alone in that feeling, I would say.
I even had it on PlayStation VR at one point, the Skyrim VR, and I played it for like an hour, and then I traded the game back in because I got bored. I was like, maybe this will make me want to play it more, being immersed into it. No, just made it worse. Made me feel sick.
Yeah, like Skyrim definitely had its moment. Like I definitely had, you know, quite a bit of fun with Skyrim back in the day, but for me that was where like things started changing a bit with Bethesda Game Studios. Like I was into Morrowind and Oblivion, especially Oblivion. I loved Oblivion. Oblivion was like a pretty big moment, like growing up, you know, with games for me. But I don't know, like you know, Skyrim was like, okay, this is really, really sick on one hand, and it's like kind of lame on the other hand, and it's not as deep as a role-playing game as some of their past ones. And you know, and then like I feel like Obsidian just totally upstaged them with New Vegas. Like I think New Vegas was better than 3 in every way. And then when you got to like Fallout 4, it was kind of the same deal where it was like, this is, you know, like the settlement building and stuff was super cool, but it's like the actual game they want you to play here.
Boring.
Yeah, like it's kind of lame. And then the Fallout 76 and just on and on. And yeah, I've really lost interest in that studio.
That one.
Yeah.
Gosh, Fallout 76, I pre-ordered that, and then I think I played it twice.
Yeah.
Because
probably 2 more times than you needed to be honest.
Yeah, right. I remember I built a base, and for some reason a ghoul just kept T-posing in my thing, even if I kept going to different servers. Just was always there, and the game just was broken. And I've heard it got better, but I don't care enough anymore.
See, for me, like that was one of those games where even if it got better, like I still wasn't interested. Yeah. Whereas like Cyberpunk was a case of like, you know what, it sucks they rushed this game out, and the decision makers at this studio were clearly greedy and, you know, didn't manage this project right, and kind of did all their talented artists a huge disservice by pushing this out in the state it was in. But then like when it's actually cleaned up, it's like, oh, this is sick. Like artistically, this is incredible stuff. Whereas like Fallout 76, I never thought was interesting in the first place. But I mean, that's me. Obviously, some people, you know, some people feel differently. I thought it was going
to be a cool co-op Fallout, but it just never worked. So I was
right.
And then no one else wants to play it. So now I'm like, okay, well.
How many times the detail was it? What's the meme? Like 20 times the detail, or what was it?
I don't remember.
It's hard to remember.
76 times the detail.
Yeah, it's hard to remember all the Todd Howard memes at this point, but.
Rod Broward.
Yeah. Well, hey, Sean, I probably have like 5-10 more minutes that I can swing. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to while I'm on here?
I'm trying to think. What would you say is like your favorite moment with the series? Like right now it's giving me a timer of like 4 minutes, but worst case, you know, we just do another 5-minute recording.
Yeah.
So totally what would you say would be like one of your favorite moments in the series? Like I'm sure that's hard to pick alone, but just like in general, like something that definitely stuck out to you that you remember that's like, oh my god, this was the coolest thing ever.
I mean,
with me, with Dark Souls 2, one of my favorites was just like realizing that you could fight the pursuer before the pursuer.
Oh yeah, up on that little platform near the bonfire. Yep, that's a super cool little encounter you can just stumble on or completely miss. I mean, for me, it's probably like the nostalgia or like the bias for those, or those initial experiences with DS1, because that was my first game. I mean, I don't think anything will compare to Undead Burg and like Undead Parish, for the first time, like when I really sucked. I had no idea what I was doing. I was scared. I was playing scared. Taurus demon up on the bridge, like all the dragon on the bridge, or I guess, is that a wyvern? That's a wyvern, isn't it? It's not a dragon.
Yeah, I think it is a wyvern because it's only got the 2 feet.
If we'd like to be technical, let's be technical. But anyway,
so called the Hellkite. Oh, it's actually called Drake, in 1. It's called a Hellkite Drake. See, they got it a little more correct.
Yeah, like Drake. That's, I don't know. It's a little more appropriate probably. But yeah, it's probably those initial experiences. Like I've had like some, I don't know, like some achievements, I guess you could say, with speed running with DS3 over the years that I'm like, I don't know, proud of, or that were fulfilling or something like that. But I think the most magical moment was probably the first 10 hours with DS1, because there's just like, if I could erase that part of my brain and experience it over again, I would, because that's pretty special stuff.
Right.
And it's cool to know that a lot of people were probably having that for the first time with Elden Ring. In these last couple months, they had never touched these games before. They sort of knew the reputation. They were sort of scared off. They're like, all right, like, I'm going to give this a try. And they probably had their own moment like that with Elden Ring. So I don't know. That's always, that first impression's pretty hard to beat.
Oh yeah. Like with me, like just going back and thinking about how scared I was with Bloodborne, and then now I screw around with that game so much, I'll just be like, la 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 la, you're dead, you're dead. And it's just like, I'll run through the game like it's nothing. Like, I was showing one of my friends who hasn't beaten the game, I was like, you want to see a pro play it? And I'm just running through, smacking people, running away. And he's like, how are you doing that, not dying? I know how far they'll run.
Yeah, it comes with time. Like, your first playthrough of any game like that is going to be a bit intimidating, and some months down the line, you're going to be running around with the Cause Parasite and the Augur of Ebrietas, just shooting noodles at people, doing a meme run.
Bloodborne was so good. I did a full magic run in Bloodborne, and that was probably my favorite one because it was so hard.
Yeah, you have to spec your character in a pretty specific way to be able to do it, but I think it's totally worth it.
Yeah, like magic runs, I know you agree with me with like magic runs are just fun.
Oh yeah.
When done right. And then I always have the meme runs with the fist weapons, or I've done in, I want to say it's Dark Souls. I want to say it was Dark Souls 3. I did a broken straight sword run. And I think I got like halfway through it because it was just taking so long.
Yeah, that sounds relatively miserable.
Fist weapon runs though are fun because you're either gonna die trying, or you're gonna show them what the backside of your hand looks like.
That is true. That there's one of two ways that run's gonna go. Yeah.
Like, I'm really excited in Elden Ring to get to Huaralu with my fists.
Oh yeah, there
Full
you go.
wrestler mode, and then getting the I scaled the sliders to just make his arms just beefy and stupid.
Oh nice, just like a total meathead run. I like that.
Very skinny body, all arms.
This guy skipped core day. He skipped leg day. This guy only just does curls. Day. Yeah. No, it's the meme runs are great, and I think all of these games have builds and playthrough styles that are it's worth going back and experiencing. Like, I did that with Demon Souls. Like I was saying, I did a pure magic playthrough where I was using the large sword of Moonlight, which is a really underrated variation of that sword.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the one in Demon Souls, right?
Demon Souls, the original. I love that sword, and just spells and like keeping it really pure, like never deviating. And it's just a fun way to play, right? Like when you actually put those restrictions on yourself, you're like, nope, I'm committing. This is what I'm doing for the whole cycle. It's so much fun.
Yeah, Elden Ring, actually, from what I noticed, I think they did kind of do what Bloodborne did with the Moonlight Greatsword, where its weapon art, when you use it, it actually turns it into its Moonlight Greatsword form.
Yeah, and you can
like
shoot the
trick
beams.
Weapon. Yep. And that's how it worked in Bloodborne, if I'm remembering it right.
Yep. And yeah, because I did a couple cycles with it like that in Elden Ring with my mage, and it was so much fun. So much fun.
Yeah, and I was very surprised at the fact that they just pretty much reused the weapon completely, and then Gira's wheel, Gizra, something like that.
Yeah, Giza's wheel. It's the whirligig saw.
Yeah, it's literally just the trick weapon.
It's awesome.
Of the whirligig saw.
But I love stuff like that. You know, it's like they were, like they know what players love, and they leaned into that. And yeah, the Moonlight Greatsword in Elden Ring, it's actually my favorite variation because it's, like you said, it feels familiar when you're using it, but the design, it just feels a little more fantastical. Like it really fits the game. And then the way in which you actually obtain it, you know, kind of the storytelling part of the sword too, what it represents, I just think it's the coolest.
Oh yeah, and I think Elden Ring, and I know I've mentioned this before, how Elden Ring definitely has like a lot of Bloodborne influence, like with Volcano Manor. Like I told you before, it looks like they took an unused part of Yharnam and put it in it, because like even just
the buildings, the iron gates,
you look at all the architecture literally looks like it's ripped straight from maybe something unused out of Bloodborne, and I haven't seen many people talk about that.
Oh yeah.
But like, you know, if you look at the gates on just like the brick walls, you can tell, like, if I'm sure you've put in plenty of hours of Bloodborne, if you know, you could probably recognize just like it's the same exact stuff from Bloodborne. Like the rats are almost identical to the rats from Bloodborne.
Yeah,
I noticed that. I was like, they literally have the pustules. Yeah, for sure. And I think, Volcano Manor is so awesome. And that struck me right away. I was like, wow, I feel like I'm stepping right back into Bloodborne here for this legacy dungeon. Definitely my favorite.
I even included that in the last video I did, where I made a remark about, you know, it does feel like parts of Elden Ring really sort of harken back to like the best art direction from the previous game. Yeah. And when I say that, I show Volcano Manor because that's such a clear example for me. And you know, the Academy, Raya Lucaria, which is one of my favorite areas in Elden Ring, you can definitely feel like the Irithyll, the Boreal Valley kind of vibes there. And there's a lot of moments like that in Elden Ring where maybe if you're new to the series, you haven't played the previous games, you wouldn't know, and that's fine. But if you've played, you know, you've been with these games for a while, those nods are all there without being cheesy or hokey or anything like that. They still feel like Volcano Manor still feels like inspired and unique, you know?
Yeah, it's very subtle, and it's like enough to where you look at it and you're like, why is there a town inside of a house?
Yeah.
It's literally called Volcano Manor.
But like in a volcano, there's like a house, there's a volcano, there's like a town. It's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to make sense.
And then Rykard is somehow in a cave underneath this volcano, and it's a trip in itself.
Oh yeah.
But
aspiring death metal vocalist Rykard, by the
way. That was another moment in Elden Ring that I just busted out laughing. And I'm in that weird minority that doesn't find his voice epic, finds it more funny than anything, where he's like, join the super king in the family.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious. I think it was meant to be. I think it's intentional comedy.
Like, Jacksepticeye was playing the game and he was like, oh, this is the most epic voice acting in the game, but I'm just laughing. I'm just like, it will devour the very gods.
Yeah, he sounds like he wants to be the vocalist of a black metal band.
Sounds like he wants to die. I'm just
so funny.
It's probably the funniest part in the game. But yeah, I mean.
And then he goes full on, like, I don't know, it feels a little bit like modern Doom. It feels even a little bit like Returnal with the skulls coming at you. I mean, I think that fight is actually
funny
awesome.
enough. I've never seen that. Yeah. Other than in videos, I've never seen the Rain of Skulls.
Really? Like you've never experienced that while fighting him?
I kill him so fast with that weapon.
You're like, yo, I'm just so legit at this game that I don't even get to that point.
like I said, it's kind of like I feel like I miss second phases too much because I accidentally break the game.
Yeah.
With the bleed build that I was just like, this is gonna be a cool idea to do because it looks really cool. Ends up being the most broken thing in Elden Ring. Demon Souls, Magic Run, beat the game in like 5 hours or so. Yeah. And this is too easy. I don't know why. And then I play with a different weapon. I'm like, oh, I just beat the game. I just broke the game. That's all it was.
Yeah, and you can like, I mean, that I remember that being a big thing in that initial playthrough, and I tried to stay super blind with Elden Ring. I wasn't, Googling anything.
Know bleed was gonna be ridiculously broken.
Right, and I also kept wondering, like, it was sometimes tricky to sense, am I under-leveled? Am I over-leveled? Like, I think my initial playthrough, I was a bit under-leveled the whole way, but it was always a little tricky to know, and with a lot of these games, especially at first, you might just accidentally over-level your character and kind of coast through, and then on subsequent playthroughs, when you don't do that, it's like, oh, okay, this is actually way harder than I thought.
Like, I definitely think I over-leveled myself and overpowered myself.
Yeah.
And now that I did that magic run, the game actually felt hard.
Yeah.
I was just like, why is this so easy late game? Did I just bust through it?
Yeah, I did that a lot, like purposely going into Elden Ring, and I do this in a lot of the games. Like, I just didn't really level vigor. Like, I tried to keep it super low. Like, I was doing a lot of like 20 vigor, 25 vigor, and boosting other attributes, but purposely keeping that low because I was kind of like, I want the challenge. I don't want to accidentally feel too OP. And like, the more you play the game, the more you realize, like, okay, like, if I want like a super satisfactory playthrough, maybe here's where I want to be, or there's where I want to be. But yeah, when you're blind, you have no idea. You just do whatever you do, and if you end up breaking the game, you break the game, right? Like,
yeah. First time blind playthroughs though, those are the best.
Oh yeah.
And I remember you made the network test videos, and I really wanted to watch them, and I'm like, I swear to God, I'm gonna spoil the game for myself. I need to not. And then I watched it, and then found out that it really spoiled much for me.
No, and that's, everybody's it has a different sensitivity to those kinds of things. I'm always cool consuming anything like a studio officially puts out. That was their official network test, so I was cool with whatever they were willing to show us at that point. Yeah. But I also get it.
You got it too, because I know
when I got it at the last minute.
At the same. Oh yeah, you're right.
Like, I got it
at like the same time, and then you were like, I didn't get it, and the next day I got it.
Yeah, I don't know. I had basically accepted. It's like, oh no, I just didn't get it. It's all good.
I mean, maybe they saw that you have a YouTube or something, and then that's how I always think it is. Like, I think that, like, because I'm
pretty sure FromSoft does not know who I am, but that's a funny thought.
Right, I'm sure
Katao is probably like, hey, gotta get this guy a code right now. Gotta get him in.
I'm sure, like, Body Video got the game like a month early.
Oh, I think he did. I think a lot of the big, the huge content creators and stuff. Yeah, they did. They got earlier access. And
I'm just like, man, I'm never gonna get there. Because I don't have the time to just only Dark Souls.
Yeah, that was the funniest phase to me, was like pre-release, when some of those huge content creators were like putting out videos and like, but I can't show you or tell you anything other than I did play it. It's like, what's the point of this? Like, what am I getting out of this? It's just, that was so funny.
Why are you bragging?
Yeah, it's like, okay, you played it, cool, but you can't tell me or show me anything, so what's the point?
Like, when you showed me, because I think you only showed me a few videos just for my sake, you showed me your Pumpkinhead night. This is gonna be a great game.
Yeah, that's all you need to see, that helmet.
And over,
I sent you Sean the Lion Guardian too.
Yeah.
I think in advance. Yeah.
Because I was originally gonna draw it. I don't think I drew it. I was trying to find something to motivate me, and I never drew it. I might eventually.
Yeah, it's a cool one.
Because he's still, like, I thought he was gonna be a full-on boss, kind of like the Niue from Neo. But he never was.
Yeah, kind of like
a boss.
Yeah, one of those special enemies that's not technically a boss, but it's almost like even cooler than some like real bosses.
Oh yeah.
All the
Like
games
the
kind of have those
watchdog
enemies.
boss. That's actually a cat.
Yeah.
I think that's the funniest one.
Yeah, lots of intentional comedy in From Software games, I think. I think they're trying to be ridiculous sometimes.
But like, why didn't they just call the turtle Pope Dog Pope?
Yeah.
The dog memes are ridiculous right now. You go on Reddit and that's all you'll see now.
Yeah, because just everything's a dog, right? Like the messaging.
Good
like
boys.
that just yeah.
But yeah, I know you gotta go soon, but it was nice having you.
Yeah, do you feel like you have enough audio to kind of chop up and work with here?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we
Okay,
got
cool.
almost an hour and a half, so.
All right, well, right.
And I
on.
mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure we can, maybe do this again another time too, or something if you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm always down to chat. It's not hard to, just rant about these games, as you know.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know there's other game subjects that you can easily get into, like Returnal and Doom and all that. So.
Yeah, for sure. But no, this was fun, man. Yeah, I'm glad we were able to connect and do it, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, take care, Sean.
Have
Bye.
a good one.